The things that make old people young make young people powerful. Here's how you actually process reality, and here are the different levers and knobs and dials that you can push to access the control panel or the system settings for your brain so you can stop being triggered all the time. What are the tools and techniques to enter an altered state of your choice? That's what heavily meditated is.
You basically invented biohacking. When you're doing all the things that are supposed to work and they're not working, you buy into this mindset that prevents you from trying to figure anything else out because you think that this is just the way that I am.
So you get the victim mindset, and it's brutal. So your job is to be able to change your inner state so that it reflects perfectly in your outer state.
What can we do about it?
So let me explain how we process reality in our meat bodies, because this is so useful if you're running a business or you're just in a relationship with someone or with your community.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Travis Makes Friends podcast, where it's our mission to help adults build better friendships. Today on the show, I am making friends with Dave Asprey. Dave is widely known as the father of biohacking, a serial entrepreneur, best-selling author, and founder of Bulletproof coffee. He's been a key voice in the movement to take control of biology through data-driven self-optimization, from pioneering MCT-infused coffee to developing neurofeedback systems. Dave's work straddles the cutting edge of health technology and human performance. Now he's shifting his focus with his latest book, Heavily Meditated, aimed at reducing stress, improving consciousness, and activating inner peace. Dave, what's up, man? Welcome to the show.
Well, happy to make friends, Travis.
Hey, you know what? It's high time. It's high time that we start making more friends. Which is something I definitely want to talk to you about. But before we do that, let's talk a little bit about this book. This is your fifth or sixth? Ninth book.
Yeah.
I was way off on that.
That's all right.
But this is one of those books that when I saw the title of it, I was like, oh, interesting that you're going more on the meditation route for this book rather than another, kind of supplement or something like that. Why this book, and why now? Why is it important now?
When I introduced the idea of biohacking to the world back in 2011, I had a list of things I wanted to talk about, but I couldn't talk about them all at the same time. So there's been a 25-year roadmap to bring about this radical shift in society to move away from decaying ourselves to managing ourselves and improving ourselves. And it's a different way of thinking. So when I started out, putting butter in coffee, oh my God, the number of people got pissed about that. I mean, it's worked for millions of people globally, and there's little stands in remote parts of India doing it now. It's a thing and it works. But I also talked about earthing, and I talked about red light therapy. In fact, I started this is True Dark, my glasses company that makes circadian glasses for 10 years, a bunch of knockoffs and stuff now that aren't quite the same. But so I'm into these things, and they're weird, just straight up weird. So I added little nuggets, like mentioning doing ayahuasca in 1999 when white people didn't really do that. In fact, they didn't want it to in Peru, you're white, why would you want that? I'm like, well, no, I've done my research. And the idea for Bulletproof coffee, by the way, Danger Coffee is my new brand. I have nothing to do with Bulletproof. But I was like, I want to talk about all this stuff. If I bring up meditation and altered states work at the beginning of the movement, it's just going to be too much and it's going to be too weird. So for the last 25 years, I have been going to the Andes and the Himalayas and studying with shamans and monasteries in remote parts of the world and different super high-level gurus from all these different lineages. And for the last 10 years, I've taught more than 1,000 CEOs how to have control of their brains at my neuroscience company called 40 Years of Zen. So it was time to not really move into meditation. It was just time to talk about it openly. And what I believe is that high performance is an altered state. Healing is an altered state. Flow is an altered state. Connection to your community is actually an altered state when you're really in a state of fun and play. So what are the tools and techniques to enter an altered state of your choice? And that's what heavily meditated is. Here's how you actually process reality, but you cannot see this with your brain, but it's what your brain's actually doing.
Yeah.
And here are the different levers and knobs and dials that you can push to access the control panel or the system settings for your brain so you can stop being triggered all the time.
Yeah, it's a science-based approach to meditation. Yeah.
But it definitely validates all of the ancient stuff, at least most of it.
Yeah.
Right? The thing is, which of those practices, should you go do some sort of psychedelic? Well, there's a chapter on that. And there's chapters on other things that really aren't talked about in modern practice, but there is evidence of them historically. So I put it all there, and I've tested everything in there, and the 3 different buckets of breath work and the different kinds of meditation. You read it, like, that's the one. That's what I needed. But the biggest one is just understanding what's really going on in your brain. And if you're an entrepreneur, it's even worse.
So let's go back in time a little bit then to your journey you basically invented biohacking.
Oh yeah, I created the word on this. It was actually, the idea for it came on the side of Mount Kailash, which is the holiest mountain in the world.
Okay.
In a remote part of Western Tibet. I had like 3 months. I was wandering around going, how do I take all this work I've done in longevity? No one under 60 cares about longevity. In fact, longevity, they didn't even think it was real back in 2004. So I'm like,
which is crazy. Like that was so recent. You said 2004, like it was like 1943 or something, you know?
That was, when I was there in Tibet, and like one of the first foreign people to go to Mount Kailash was just there in 1984. Like 20 years before me, it was Victor Chan, the Dalai Lama's best friend. And he wrote about that in one of his books with the Dalai Lama. So this is like I can't say unexplored, but unexplored by Westerners part of the world.
Yeah.
And I was just pondering, I've learned from my elders. I'm in my 20s. I'm learning longevity from people in their 80s who have more energy than me. Like, this is crazy. I can do this. And once I got my health back, like, I can just keep going.
Yeah.
But I could get no one who I worked with to care. So I said, I have to rebrand longevity into biohacking. Because here's the thing. The things that make old people young make young people powerful. Right? And so it's all biohacking. Yeah. You get to choose your state. And I don't care if you do it with ribeye, you do it with butter in your coffee, you do it with meditation, you change the light bulbs in your home, you jump in a cold plunge. All of them are tools that you get to put in your environment to change your state. Your physical state, your mental, your emotional, even your spiritual state. That's the game we're all playing.
Yeah, because you were basically kind of on the Silicon Valley hustle and not focused on health at all at the beginning of all of this.
No, I was not focused on health at all. I wanted to lose weight though. I hit 300 pounds by the time I was 23. I'd had
23. Wow.
I'd had 3 knee surgeries for arthritis I'd had since I was 14. When I was 26 though, I was really feeling bad about disability insurance. I couldn't remember anything in a meeting. My body hurt all the time. And I just felt like a zombie and nothing would work. I could drink all the coffee in the world and I'd get like 20 minutes of clarity. So I said, I got to do something about this. I went to the doctors and they had nothing to offer. I tried going to the gym 90 minutes a day, 6 days a week. Okay. And I did that for 18 months straight and I never lost a pound. And
wow.
It was only when I went to a longevity doctor.
It's a little discouraging.
It was horrible. And I was on a low-fat, low-calorie diet too. That idea that, if you eat less and work out more, you have to lose weight because of Newton's law, it's bullshit. Straight up, you could eat a gram of uranium with 1 million calories and you wouldn't get fat. And that makes all the calorie people angry. Well, you can't digest that. I'm like, so it's how much you digest. Let's talk about protein versus soy. Anyway.
Interesting.
I've written a whole book about that in 20 languages now. So if you guys don't believe me, then don't believe me and stay fat or malnourished. It's okay. So anyhow, I distracted myself. So I've tried losing all this weight, but I went to the doctor, the one I sent my parents to. It was one of the first anti-aging doctors in Silicon Valley named Phil Miller. And he calls me and goes, Dave, your testosterone levels are lower than your mom. This is real. And today, everyone's testosterone levels are low. Like if you're listening to the show, if you're a man or a woman, your testosterone is low because of our crappy lighting and because of our food and because of our fragrances and plastics and all this stuff going on. It's like a perfect storm to destroy human fertility and motivation. Wow. So I know what it's like to be low T and it's horrible. I had the man boobs and everything. So I fixed it, right? And anyone can do this stuff. I just had to live it all. And when I really got down to it, I tried being rich. When I was 26, I made $6 million with the company that held Google's first servers. I was a co-founder of the professional services department there. Lost it when I was 28. And when I had $6 million, pre-Biden dollars, this is like a lot of money back then. Sorry, you got to say what's real.
Catching strays.
So I looked at a friend, like, I will be happy when I have 10 million. So I also was in Entrepreneur Magazine when I was 23.
That is some messed up psychology right there, yeah.
But it's how dopamine works.
Right, exactly.
And, like, I'll be happy when I'm famous. I'm 23. I'm in Entrepreneur Magazine wearing a double extra large t-shirt. I'm the first guy to sell anything over the internet before the browser was invented. And people today are like, well, you have no pictures of you when you're fat. And I'm like, bitch, that's from Entrepreneur Magazine. You see how puffy and fat I am in that? Like, you can't deny that. And it's not photoshopped.
Also, when you look like that, you're not eager to have people take pictures of you.
Oh.
I blew up to, I was a few years ago, I was 250 pounds.
So you know it.
I was camera shy is not the word. I was camera like avoidant. People get their cameras out. I was like, oh,
I was the same. In fact, digital cameras really came out in about 2000-ish where they were halfway useful. And before that, there were very few pictures of me.
Yeah.
Because I didn't want them.
Mm-hmm.
In fact,
you don't want that reminder
of
what you actually look like.
And when I was like 18 or something, let's just say I've progressed as a human. I had a lot of self-loathing and shame and things. And I threw away all the fat pictures of me when I was young. Just put them all in the trash one day. I'm like, I don't like myself.
Yeah.
And I don't have that problem anymore. It would be kind of maybe useful to have them. Then again, they'd just be in a drawer, so who cares? My parents have a few.
Just have a photo album of Fat Dave.
Exactly. It's an extra large paper. But it's like, there's so much that happens with entrepreneurs in particular. So for me, I'm like, if I become wealthy, I'll be happy. If I become famous, I'll be happy. I also was like, if I get married, and have a relationship, I'll be happy. So I got married in my mid-20s to the wrong person for a couple of years of unhappiness. So I tried all the normal recipes for happiness.
Was that part of how the 6 million vanished?
Only a tiny portion of it.
Oh, okay.
Most of it vanished because part of it was the dot-com crash, but I was so high up in the company that I had inside information, so I wasn't allowed to trade my stock. It went from $80 a share to $5 a share, and my hands were cuffed.
And you watched the whole thing happen.
That was so much stress.
Ooh, talk about a little added dose of depression.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was nasty.
Yeah.
And I found out years later that the reason that company went bankrupt was all the executives got $20 million a piece if they went bankrupt. So magically they did. Shocking.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Wait, how? Someone was incentivizing them to do this?
Yeah. The CEO who had just come in had a $20 million golden parachute in case the company went down.
Wow.
So he just gave all the other execs one. And then magically, when the company went down, they all got paid out. And all the...
Strangely enough.
Yeah. All the normal employees like me got, nothing.
Yeah.
And this happens a lot. Like venture capitalists and investors usually have hidden tools that they'll use. I'm enjoying advising entrepreneurs on how to not get screwed by VCs lately. That's been a lot of fun.
I'm sure VCs love you for that.
Yeah, no, I raised $90 million from them for Bulletproof. So, and I used to work for a VC. So like you know the game, and it's the same as the government. It works like this. You have like a potato peeler and you start peeling the potato. And after a little while, you're like, hey, you keep taking pieces off. Like, oh, sorry, we'll stop. But they never put them back on. And they just wait a couple months and they start peeling them again. Oh, it's for both of us. It's for your own safety. And I'm like, why is my new coffee company called Danger Coffee? Because I choose danger. If you tell me you're doing something for my safety, I will pour coffee on you. Like, it is not okay. I do things for my own safety.
By the way, your team sent me a package of Danger that I was going to bring here to this interview to have like sitting here, but I drank all of it. So
I actually brought you one. It's in the front.
Oh, I'm looking for it. It was very, very good. Okay. I'm a coffee guy. I'm a black coffee guy.
It's really good coffee.
I like the taste of black coffee, and it's very, very good.
And there's a big dose of trace minerals that can raise the electrical activity in your cells. It's actually got like $22 worth of trace minerals if you were to buy a supplement. So you're getting that plus the coffee, and it's great coffee.
It is really good. Yeah, well done on that.
But
sidetrack anyway.
Yeah, the idea of the brand is it's danger because who knows what you might do. Like you might start a company, you might ask that person out. Like you might do something that is right, even if it's hard. And that requires energy for willpower. And so just my whole path has been dealing with stuff like that, where investors are saying, let's take some rights, or lately the government. Like, oh yeah, it's just 2 weeks. And like 2 years later, they've destroyed all the small businesses, including a couple of mine. And I'm like, you can take your 2 weeks. You ever try that again? Right. And the answer is no.
Absolutely not. Yeah.
Right. And I'm hoping enough people got that. If not, guys, drink Danger Coffee or whatever it takes. So the next time someone says, well, I'm going to threaten you, you can be like, no, I am the threat.
Yeah. No, hang on a second. Yeah. Okay. So first of all, it's crazy that you were able to get to that type of net worth, regardless of whether or not you lost it or kept it at that age. It's shooting yourself in the foot to see if you can walk, and you did it. Was that kind of was any of that part of your thinking behind like getting all of this taken care of, or was it? Did you feel like it was more like a rock bottom moment, like I have to do something, or I will kill myself doing this? Like not actually kill myself.
Talking about like losing weight, or
losing weight, getting control of your health. Like, because now, like having experienced what it's like to live at this other version of you, that's the only time that you can look back on that and go, I was doing this high-powered entrepreneurial thing that requires a crazy amount of energy and sacrifice and output. And I was doing that, with my hands tied behind my back because I had, like you said, I only had 20 minutes of focus time every day because I was destroying my body, destroying my mental state.
The reality is that fat people are willpower athletes. And if you've always been reasonably thin and healthy, you just have no idea. Because when you're fat, your body is taking electricity that should go to your prefrontal cortex to give you willpower, and it's putting it in your pants. It's using it to make inflammation and more fat cells. And
it's using it to tie your shoes.
Exactly.
That was a big red flag for me, man. When I tie your shoes. I'd tie my shoe and I'd get up and be like, that was tough. Being down there tying my shoes for that 12 seconds, like, I'm out of breath,
Yeah, a lot of people are stuck there right now.
Yeah.
The problem, though, is when you're fat, you're also trying to exercise more and eat less, which sucks all of your remaining energy. So if there was a plate of cookies here in front of us, and I was still obese, they would be screaming at me to eat them. And I'd be like, no. It'd be like a 2-year-old. Eat me, no, eat me, no, eat me, no. And finally, fine, I'll eat half of one. And then I'd just be ashamed. Why did I give in?
Half the plate.
Right? And the amount of noise coming from the cookies for you, if you're healthy, you're just not going to crave them the same way. And so I have a lot of compassion for people who have become as heavy as I was, just because it's miserable and you think it's your fault. And then you do what you're supposed to do and it doesn't work. And that was my motivation for starting all the health stuff, the whole biohacking movement. My goal was I want 5 people to not go through the hell I went through. That was why I started the Bulletproof blog back in the day when I was doing Bulletproof. Now it's just daveasprey.com. All the stuff I've written is at daveasprey.com. But I started it without meaning to start a business. I made $250,000 a year and I had stock options and I was a VP at a big company and I had 2 young kids. Starting a company was the worst thing to do. It just kind of happened. So I did it.
The worst part about that to me too is that you start buying it when you're doing all the things that are supposed to work and they're not working, then you start buying into the lie that it's just genetics or that, well, I wish I could be like that person, but I just am like my body type or like my genetics just won't allow me to lose weight or they won't allow me to get in good shape or allow me to build muscle. And I'm different than that person. You buy into this mindset that prevents you from trying to figure anything else out because you think that this is just the way that I am. So I can't do anything about it.
You get the helplessness, you get the victim mindset, and it's brutal.
It's a dark place.
And it's usually coupled with at least guilt and usually shame. And that's one of the reasons that I wrote Heavily Meditated. It's like, how do you hack shame? How do you hack anger and grudges? And what I've come to conclude is that anything that can trigger you at all means you're carrying a loaded gun. So what we all really want at the end of the day, sure, we want bodies and minds that work, but we want to be happy and we want to be in charge of our state. And when you study Buddhism or some of the other lineages, like that first awakening is empathy. Like, oh, I can feel other people's pain. And you think that's good, and then walk into a McDonald's and practice empathy. You're not going to be in a good place if you do that. So empathy is not that high of a state, but it's better than being apathetic. So you learn empathy, and then you learn compassion. And compassion is automatically wishing other people well, no matter who or what they are, before you have a chance to judge them. So it's like changing your nervous system, just like, I wish you well. Like, you're a fellow human. You're probably as screwed up as me. Right? But you don't do it consciously. You do it pre-consciously.
Sure.
And then above compassion is equanimity, or resilience is what we call it in the West. And that's when you get to choose your state and nothing can take it out of it. Someone cuts you off in traffic, you don't get mad. Someone yells at you, you don't get mad. You make a bunch of money, great. You lose a bunch of money, great. you are dialed in and you just get to choose that state. It's not that it's always going to be a constant state. That's very hard and probably not good for you. But you get to pick.
Yeah. Yeah.
You get to choose your ultimate state. Yeah. And that's my goal. And I don't have an angry voice in my head. I don't deal with shame, things like that. And a lot of entrepreneurs I've worked with we glue electrodes to their head for 5 days at 40 years of Zen. And we go really deep on where did you get your programming and what do you want it to be?
Yeah.
And one of my friends, Craig, who went there, he runs a 1,200 person company. And he said, I just realized that all of my entrepreneurial success is because I was bullied in middle school, still trying to prove he was good enough. And I know before I was 30, I was wanting to be successful because I wanted to prove I was good enough. And I don't have any of that. It's so much less work when you're being pulled towards something that matters versus when you're fighting for something. So fighting doesn't work very well. When you fight against something, it gets stronger, right? And when you move towards the positive version of it, it's better. And you can change all of the things happening in your operating system in order to make that easier. And that's what Heavily Meditated is all about.
Did you ever notice a lack of drive or ambition when you're kind of removing these chips from your shoulders?
Not at all. A lot of people worry about that.
Yeah.
And they say, well, anger is my fuel.
Yeah, a lot of people. Yeah.
If anger is your fuel, well, number one, you're an asshole.
That's the CEO that got the $20 million purse when the company went bankrupt.
Yeah, that was probably more narcissism.
Fair enough.
But, if you're an angry person, you're going to age quickly. You're going to treat your partner and your children in ways that you really wish you hadn't. And you're going to hate your life. So, yeah, we can all run on anger. Anger is a useful spark to just say, all right, I got to do something about this. But if you sit in anger, instead of thinking about it and doing something strategic, you will be absolutely controlled by the person pushing your buttons.
That's it right there. Is no matter what perception of control you think you have, you're really just being driven by the anger that you have for other people, or that vengeful state. And that's what they say. Like, if what's that saying? If when on the path to revenge, be sure to dig 2 graves, or something like that.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah.
There's a story in Heavily Meditated, and it's about a samurai from ancient lore in Japan. And his master gets killed by an assassin from the opposing clan, and he swears vengeance. But samurai code Bushido vengeance, which is not born out of anger, it's born out of duty. So he goes through and he like cuts a swath through the country, and he finds all of the bad guys and he kills each of them. And he finally comes to the head bad guy, the one who killed his master. And he's, they have their fight, and he's coming in for the killing blow, and the bad guy spits in his face. And all of a sudden he stops and he puts his sword away. And his opponent, the bad guy's like, why are you going to kill me? He goes, oh, when you spit in my face, you made me mad. I don't want to kill you in anger. I'll come back and kill you when I'm calm. Like, whoa, that is control.
Yeah, no kidding.
Right?
Yeah, well, it's like the motivation is coming from a different place, to your point.
Yeah, it was to him out of duty.
Yeah.
Right? It was out of obligation. It was not out of anger. And so I would say that if you're burning anger as your fuel source, it's kind of like burning your seed corn or eating your seed corn.
Yeah.
And seed corn, if you don't know about that, back in the explorer days in the West, you had to save enough corn to plant in the fields. And if it was too cold in winter and you ate the corn you were supposed to plant, you're screwed next year. And anger's that. So the thing is, what do you do about it? And what most of us learn to do, and God, I was a pro at this, is you're sitting in a meeting and someone says something that's disrespectful or pushes your buttons or whatever. And so like your jaw tightens for a second. You're like, Argh. And then you smile and you say the right thing, right? Everyone knows that you're pissed and you're acting like you're not. And maybe you're a better poker player, but there's something called congruence. And this is when your inner state matches your outer state. And we all have systems that are mostly invisible that tell us when someone is congruent or not.
Yeah.
So if you're trying to lead your company and you're sitting there going, everything is great, and inside you're going, we are so fucked. They know it. They feel it in their bones. So your job is to be able to change your inner state so that it reflects perfectly in your outer state. And what people will say is, wow, you are so authentic. Right? Authenticity is just a matching of the inner and outer states.
Yeah.
It's a big bar. It seems hard to do.
Yeah.
So let me explain how we process reality in our meat bodies, because this is so useful if you're running a business or you're just in a relationship with someone or with your community. I'm going to clap my hands. So if you're listening to the show, it took some amount of time for the sound to hit the microphone, and it went through some digital system, and it came out, went through your headphones, it got to your ears, and then you heard it. Except that's not real. After it got to your ears, it took about a third of a second before your brain got the signal. So your body held onto that signal, decided what it was going to make you feel about the signal before your brain got the vibration. And then before your prefrontal cortex could decide what was going on, it's another 700 milliseconds. So you're running with a third of a second censorship window and a 3/4 of a second thinking about it window before anything happens. And you think that you're in charge, but your body's in charge. And it runs the operating system of all life on the planet. And this is the same life if it runs a herd of deer, slime mold, or politicians, kind of the same thing. Anything that's alive, trees, plants, they all run this. And they run it before any conscious thought can happen. And we measure brainwaves. You can prove this over and over. So number one is fear. These are all F words. So if something is scary to your body, not to your mind, your body will say, okay, let's make him feel fear about it. And that means instantly run away from, kill, or hide. This will take 9 times more energy than anything else in your body. And if you learn how to meditate, it'll only take 6 times more energy. This is a overriding operating system level, do not get eaten or fall off a cliff kind of a thing. But it takes a lot of energy to do that. So if your body says, all right, it's not scary, what's next? Another F word, food. Famine has killed everything at least a few times in the last couple billion years. So a third of the average person's thoughts every day are about tacos. Right? It's about food anyway. Right? There are studies of this. So what would happen if you weren't feeling hungry? Would you have more willpower available? Yeah, and there's evidence of this for sure. So we have fear and then food. This is before you can think. And then the next F word that all life has to do to stay around forever, you know that one? You have to know.
Friendship.
No. Multiple generations, dude.
Fear,
food. It's an F word. You got this.
I'm failing the quiz right now.
It's not failing. No, I'm going to say fertility, but it's the other F word.
I see.
So literally,
I see what you're saying.
All of reality, every microsecond, all the time, your hardware, the meat you ride around in, it is saying, is it scary? Can I eat it? And should I hump it?
Yeah.
Okay. Is there anything you've ever done you're ashamed of that isn't one of those 3?
That's a good question. Probably not.
No. All of the things that we take credit for that our body does automatically, it's a huge source of shame and guilt. And it's natural. Of course, going to the gym looks less attractive than eating the pizza.
Yeah.
That's just your operating system trying to keep you from starving to death. And it's okay that you don't want to do that. It's not even you. It's your body wanting to do that. So it seems kind of dark. Because if you're sitting in a meeting for your business and your operating system's going, is that person scary? Is this scary? Oh, can I eat that? Oh, look, there's something. And then, oh my gosh, like, look at those legs. How are you going to get anything done?
Yeah.
And that's where your prefrontal cortex comes in. And what I'm proposing is that you can reprogram those 3 things. And when you do that, you spend a lot less energy on them. And that fear becomes peace. And that hunger becomes nourishment. And that OnlyFans and all of the other things that people do, that becomes actually a source of altered states, like sacred nourishment. In fact, 20% of people report meeting God during orgasm at least once in their life. So there's a chapter in Heavily Meditated saying one of the gateways to altered states is conscious practices in the bedroom.
Yeah.
And it's no better or worse than psychedelics. It's just something to know about. And if that's the one that resonates, then go take a class on how to do it. Like, it's not that hard to do. And then thankfully, there's 2 more F words that your body will process in order all the time before you can think. And you can't stop it from running these, but you can change what it identifies as a threat or as a food or as an appropriate mate. And the next F word is friend. You nailed it. We are wired in our bones to support our species and others around us. All life on Earth will do this. And this is why sheep form a herd. This is why vegans also form a herd. It's just kidding, vegans. I love you guys. I was a vegan. I have to say that. Anyway, it's also why we see a glade of trees and we see ecosystems. Life supports life. And the way we do that is with our tribe and with our friends. And when you have connection, authentic connection with your friends, or even just with your community, it is a source of nourishment for your operating system, for your body. And the final F word, that's really the basis of heavily meditated, is forgiveness. Because if you have enough energy left, because you weren't afraid, you weren't hungry, you felt loved, and you felt connected, you have so much energy left. What forgiveness is the process of turning off system alerts in your body. So if you're feeling angry about something, you can run the reset process from the book. There's 8 steps. It works better with electrodes on your head at my brain science laboratory, but I'm giving away a $20,000 piece of information in the book because I just want people to be able to do it at home. And when you do this, you're like, man, every time that happens, it just pisses me off and I lose sleep over it and it just gets under my skin. Your body's going to keep doing that. It's just trying to keep you safe. And it's going to do that for the rest of your life unless you do something about it. And it isn't about willing yourself to not do that. It is happening before the thoughts.
Yeah.
So there's a way of going into an altered state. And there's a whole chapter in the book on this. And it's what I teach, billionaires on how to do this. And when they're done, they're different people because they're driving and someone cuts them off. Their heart rate doesn't change. They just don't care, right? Their mother-in-law says something mean to them and they just laugh instead of getting triggered.
Yeah.
Right. And 91.7% of people who run the reset process for 5 days with my team report improved relationships.
Wow.
And almost every other measure of positive improvement is 50% or more people are reporting them. It's crazy. It's achievable.
Yeah.
And when entrepreneurs come, they're coming to 40 years of Zen, and we have an executive chef and we have custom-made hardware and software. Like, it's a whole program. But the core piece of technology there is actually a process. It doesn't have to be the electronics. And that is why I wrote Heavily Meditated. Because if we can build a world full of people who are impossible to trigger, it means it's impossible to be programmed. You get to choose your state. You get to choose your programming. And when a marketing company comes along and tries to manipulate you, you'll laugh. When a government comes along and tries to manipulate you, you'll laugh. When anyone tries to say what you must do, you'll laugh and say, I don't choose to do that.
Yeah.
So it's actually the highest level of freedom is to be resilient, to be able to choose your state and to not be cowed, to not be scared, to not be programmed, and to recognize that if your body does feel fear, that's natural and it's normal, and to have zero guilt and zero shame and exactly the tools to turn it off quickly. Unless it's real fear, because there is a tiger in the room, in which case your body's going to make the right stress hormones, you'll jump out of the way. Hooray.
Sure.
So there are things that are actually worthy of fear. It's just your body's terrible at finding them.
Using it when it's useful.
Yeah.
Rather than when it's not. Yeah. Because then you start making all the decisions from this state of fight or flight and anxiousness.
Yeah.
That's not a great state to be making, life-changing decisions from.
Not at all. I worked at the start of the biohacking movement with a guy who was a hedge fund trader.
Okay.
Was buying his own island, kind of a thing. And I said, well, let's use a little device here and let's track your stress. It's called heart rate variability, but it's real-time heart rate variability. It's something you can train. And I write about this in Heavily Meditated too. And he goes, all right, fine. And hedge fund managers generally don't do anything they don't want to do. So he doesn't do it. He gets bored on an airplane. He does it. He goes, that was pretty good. And I'm going to do it every day for 6 weeks, like you said. And he says, all right, at the end of 6 weeks, I can put myself in this unstressed parasympathetic state. And he puts a little clip on his ear, sits down, market bell rings to open. And he goes into the red zone. And he goes, you know what? For 20 years, I've been trading from a state of fight or flight, and I didn't know it.
Wow.
Because until you've been trained on these techniques, you will not know the feeling of your body being sympathetic. It's unless you're highly anxious and stressed, you're way in that zone. But when it flips over, you won't feel it. So it took him another 6 weeks of training. And when he was done, he was like, I am now unstressed when I trade. My trades are better, and I come up at the end of the day, and I have energy for my kids. And that is so precious. If you're allocating energy consciously or unconsciously to anger, fear, loneliness, cravings, it just wastes all the energy that you ought to be putting into your mission and into your family, into your community. So I just want people to shift out of fear and out of loneliness and out of junk food land and into how do I do more for the world around me? Because the world around you will take care of you if you take care of it. And I think that's missing.
I love that you brought up the friendship community thing. Obviously, the show's called Travis Makes Friends. We talk a lot about the loneliness thing. It was kind of almost by accident, honestly. We before the show was called Build Your Network for a few years, talked about like networking for professionals. And frankly, I just kind of got bored of the topic and just started annoying me to keep talking about it. And so I was like, well, what about, what can we still talk about that's somewhat related? And I, through my research, kind of found that like the best quote unquote networkers I knew were really just good at building friendships with people. But for some reason, we put them in two separate categories. So I was like, well, why don't we just talk about making friends? And I started doing more research on it and started figuring out like, wow, 50% of US adults report feelings of loneliness. Wow, like loneliness is worse for your physical well-being than smoking up to 15 cigarettes per day. It's a double-digit increase in all-cause mortality just from internal subjective feelings of loneliness. And I started looking at, all the blue zones, which for anybody listening would be the places in the world where the highest concentration of centenarians exist, people who live past 100. And the diets were kind of all over the place. The main thing was that they were whole food diets.
There's one other main thing too you might not know about.
Yeah, please.
Not to burst the bubble there. These are also areas that have very high taxes and very low income and bad record keeping.
Really?
So there's a meaningful number of these super centenarians who just took over their parents' identity to avoid inheritance tax.
Oh, really? Wow.
Yeah.
Wow, that's pretty wild. So it's skewed data.
Yeah, and Dan Buettner is a lovely human who's responsible for blue zones. And unfortunately, I don't think the nutritional conclusions are accurate, but I think his motivations are so good. Like he's a great guy, and I've appreciated getting to know him. Yeah.
Well, one of those things that was inherent in all of those places was a deep sense of belonging.
Yes.
A deep sense of community. And I wouldn't call myself a biohacker per se, but I've done a lot more research than the typical person just by having the show. We've done over 1,000 episodes on the podcast. I've talked to a lot of different people from a lot of different walks of life. I've read a lot of different books, including yours, including Peter Attia's work, including Stephen Gundry's, like all these different people who I've researched. And the one thing I find missing from the majority of it is community, is belonging. And it seems like that's one of the more inherent, bigger needle movers that exists. Why, first of all, do you think that the community isn't really focusing as much on that as a lever to pull? And what can we do about it?
I think with guys like Peter Attia, he's very focused on things like cholesterol, which most of the longevity doctors that I know of are not believing in anymore. So it's very mechanistic, right? Community is how I made biohacking into a $63 billion industry. I've been running the Biohacking conference this will be our 13th year. We have 4,000 people showing up for 3 days in Austin, May 28th. Steve Aoki is playing sets for us. And I've got like the top speakers in the world. Joe Dispenza's there, James Nestor, the author of the book Breath, Ryan Holiday about stoicism. So it's this interesting mix of mindset, but it's there for the community. And I started the first grass-fed, no bad seed oil restaurant in LA about 10, 12 years ago.
Okay.
And it was for community. You don't make money in restaurants in LA, right? And people met, they got married there, businesses were started there. It became a community meeting spot to make biohacking a thing. And today, I'm running Upgrade Labs, which is a franchise for biohacking and AI and longevity. So people come in, and there's a big area in the front where you sit down in community around a piece of tech that actually changes the mitochondrial charge in your cells. So you're sitting there talking with people, building community. I don't think you can do the advanced personal development practices by yourself. It does not work. I would not be here if my elders hadn't taken me under their wings when I was in my 20s. If I hadn't have done some of this advanced healing work with sages and gurus and therapists and all the other stuff, it's not a lonely path. So you have to have that.
It's more inherent in the pursuit.
Yeah. And I interviewed the former Surgeon General of the U.S. who'd only ever written one book.
Vivek Murthy.
And when he came on, he's like, look, this is right before I think Biden brought him back in as Surgeon General. And he said, there's an epidemic, not a pandemic, just an epidemic of loneliness. And wow, after serving many presidents, it's like, this is my number one observation. And if you look, the number of clubs have just gone down and down and down. When's the last time you were a member of a bowling league?
Yeah.
Or any of the things that used to just be normal things? It's been replaced by swiping. And that's not necessarily a good thing. But here's the problem that I've seen and I've experienced. If you're an entrepreneur, it's very hard to have normal friends.
Yeah.
And you can have normal friends, but you're talking about amounts of money that are not in the same universe as most of your friends.
Yeah.
And you're talking about problems that only go two ways if you share them with someone who's not a very unusual person. It's either going to drive envy, which is one of the nastiest things to deal with in friendships, or it's going to drive greed. Right. So saying, I have this problem, I have this, $5 million thing, and I don't know what to do with it. Or whatever else the problem is. And you're talking to someone who is a good person, but the Venn diagram overlap is so small. So you say, okay, well, then I'll just talk to people in my company. Yeah, those are your friends, except you can fire them and take away all of their money, right? So, I have a couple of people who've been with me for 10, 12 years, and I care deeply about them, and they're my friends. And at the end of the day, if they don't do what I say, they get fired. Right. And so there's always a little wedge in there. So I also, if I was really losing my mind about the business, I'm unlikely to call them up and be like, oh my God, so that just, you can't do that in leadership. So what's left, what entrepreneurs have to do is find other entrepreneurs who understand their problems. And one of the ways I've worked on solving that, I run an event called Business of Biohacking, and I teach biohacking CEOs how to build a company like I did that did $750 million in lifetime revenues when I was running it. That was Bulletproof. So I'm like, let me bring in my friends who are teachers and trainers and top marketing people, and let me show you, here's how fundraising works. So this year in October, we should have about 200 entrepreneurs, and that's where you form a tribe.
Yeah.
I have spent probably $100,000 a year on being a member of mastermind groups for the last 10 years. And that's an insane amount of money. It's actually not insane if you're running a business, though, because it's deductible. And the reason I do that is it puts me in a room where I can talk about things I don't know how to solve with people who've solved it before. And the money just serves as a filter, right? And if I was to go to a $1,000 instead of $25,000 thing like Genius Network with Joe Polish, which I've been a member for many years, it's $25,000. If I was to go to one of those, I'm likely to be supporting entrepreneurs who are running small businesses, but they're not going to be able to support me because I've got a couple more zeros in the problems I have, right? And there's nothing wrong with that. And I love supporting entrepreneurs. That's why I run an event for that. But that means if I'm going to have the advice that I need and the ability to kind of open the kimono and talk about the problems of being in business, it's got to be with people who understand the nature of the problem. And I think entrepreneurs are profoundly lonely most of the time because of this weird dynamic. And if you have a job, okay, talk to other people with a job. It's a kind of a normal thing. And I've had jobs a lot in my life. And when I became an entrepreneur, I remember I got my first venture capital round, and it was $8 million. And I'm driving on Highway 101 near Sand Hill Road, just got out of the meeting. And I looked at the amount of the company I sold and I'm like, my net worth is now $40 million. Like, oh. So like, who do I call? I call my parents? They can't process that number of zeros.
Right.
It's not in their universe. In
Right.
fact, I think there's some financial trauma in there somewhere. So that's not going to be good. So I'm like, can I call my wife at the time? No, I know there's financial trauma there.
Yeah.
It's just going to like make her eyes get big. And it's not. And you know what? I didn't call anybody. I didn't have the right people to call. And I just sat with it. It's like, wow, I kind of want to celebrate.
Yeah.
Right. This is really common. So this is why you got to find your tribe. And this is why having friends is good. And there's another part of Heavily Meditated that could be really valuable for our listeners. No one teaches you how to pick friends, right?
True.
Like your parents probably never got taught. So they might have tried to teach you or a coach. So you stumble into it, or even worse, you're 16 and you ask another 16-year-old how to pick friends.
Yeah.
Sorry, guys. You should ask someone who's 60 years old when you're 16. They might know, but they still probably don't know. And so people make a lot of mistakes and it costs a lot emotionally and even spiritually. What I learned that's maybe the most important thing for friendships and for entrepreneurships and community building and maintaining a culture is that there's only 4 kinds of people. And this comes from Lao Tzu, which is basically the Buddha of China. Okay. There's one monastery where his direct lineage has been passed down. And my friend Dr. Barry, who's in the book, taught me this.
Okay.
Category 1 people, they're always win-win. So if they do something with you, you benefit, they benefit. You might not benefit the same amount, doesn't really matter, but both people walk away better off. And they're consistent. 5% of people, very rare. And then there's category 2 people. They're usually win-win. They want to be win-win, but they screw up. And when they screw up, you can say, hey, man, that wasn't cool. And they go, I didn't know. I'm sorry. How do I make it right? You only want to have friends who are category 1 and category 2. Category 3, they're win-lose, but they don't know it.
Oof.
So this is the kind of person who will always blame other people for their problems. And you could have a video of them in a room stabbing people, holding a knife, covered in blood with a locked door. And then you unlock the door and go in and say what happened. They go, oh, it wasn't me. It couldn't have been me because I'm a good person. And they believe it. On a lie detector, it'll be true.
Yeah.
And so they're always win-lose, but you can't really tell because they believe that they're a good person. And you go to help that friend, it's weird.
Yeah.
They always benefit and you don't. And whatever they said was going to happen that was good for you never did happen. And then there's category 4 people. These are win-lose and they know it. They're sociopaths and psychopaths. And if you have a friend who's category 3 or category 4, the biggest sign, or an employee, if you just immediately like this person way more than you should, that's a huge red flag. And this comes from Robert Cialdini at the University of Arizona. I've had him on the show a couple of times. And it's like, this is a sign that they're running an operation on you. Maybe they're a sociopath and they know it. Maybe they're a narcissist, the category 3, and they don't know it. But it's not normal to just immediately fall in love with someone. And so watch out for that. It doesn't mean it's not real. It's like, oh, this is the coolest person ever. We got to connect. They're so helpful. Just be patient and see if it's real.
Yeah.
And my goal in the 9 companies in my portfolio now, if we accidentally hire a category 3, we fire him within 60 days. And if I'd have followed that advice, I would have at least $100 million in my pocket right now.
Wow.
Because I hired someone like this, and I write about this in Heavily Meditated. This executive looked me and the board in the eye every single day. I just raised $30 million of venture capital money. And we're going to grow at 40%. And we're going to lose it's either $4 or $5 million. I don't remember, some small amount of money, but we're going to grow dramatically. And it was going to set us up for an IPO. Well, every week, every month, oh yeah, we're on track. And then December 1st, she goes, we might lose 5 million instead of 4 million. I'm like, okay, that's kind of a miss, but we have enough cash. And then December 31st, she goes, oopsie, I lost 28 million.
Oh my gosh.
So I said, did you really just burn 3 years of venture capital while looking me and everyone else in the eye and telling us it wasn't happening? And here's what I learned. This person did not know what was happening because their story was, I don't fail. Therefore, if I'm failing, it can't be real and I can't see it. And I had all the red flags of this narcissistic pattern, the category 3 pattern, but I didn't know those red flags. Once I learned this, it was like unlocking stuff that didn't make sense. I'm like, I get it. And so when you're working on building your community, your closest friends, and building your company, you better learn how to identify the category 3s and 4s and what to do about it. And that's also in Heavily Meditated.
Yeah. That's super, super helpful, man. On the loneliness thing, when I was reading through Vivek Murthy's document that's on the U.S. Surgeon General's website still to this day, and anybody can go download it, which I recommend. The interesting thing to me was that they separated it into 2 categories, which was loneliness and social isolation.
Yes.
Social isolation is an objective third-party measurement of how much time you're spending with other people. And that it's an easy fix. You can prescribe, go hang out with your friends more. You can prescribe, go get around other people.
Only if you have friends. A lot of people don't even have one good friend, like 40% of people, I think.
Yeah, which is also a big problem. And go make more friends. But there's a prescription that can be derived from the problem. The more insidious nature of loneliness to me is that it's a subjective internal state that we have trouble defining or identifying inside of people. So to your point, and this is why I think entrepreneurs struggle with it more than other categories of people, is because you feel like you're surrounded by people all the time. You have your employees, and maybe you have a great relationship with your employees. You have, your professional network at the mastermind groups and these other places. But even when you're with those people, you still feel these feelings of loneliness. And I read this book from Anthony DeMello called Awareness. And one of the things that he says in that book is that he kind of phrases it as like the antidote to loneliness is actually aloneness. And essentially what I took from that and from all the books now that I've read on this subject, it seems to be that one of the biggest solves for the problem is not even necessarily your relationship with other people, although that is a big factor. It's more to do with your relationship with yourself. And, if you don't like you, it doesn't matter how many friends you have.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter if your spouse loves you unconditionally or if your kids love you, or it just doesn't matter. If you don't like you, life is going to be really, really, really long and arduous and painful and lonely and isolated. And then that's when you start creating fake friendships because you're not ever allowing anybody to know who you are, because you don't really even know who you are. You don't respect there's no self-respect, there's no self-awareness, there's no self-esteem. And then you just kind of go throughout life thinking you've checked the boxes. You have all the material measurements of what it could mean to be abundant in relationships, yet you still feel lonely, which is one big reason why I'm a big proponent of the biohacking space, is that it focuses more on you. Like, you have to fix what's going on inside of here, or else it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how many friends you have. You're always going to be lonely.
I felt lonely all through probably until I was about 35, just all the time, partly because I had Asperger's syndrome. And I say had, and I write about that in the book too, where it's like, that is something that's hackable. It's just a lot of work. And the feeling of loneliness absolutely happens in a room full of people, right? And what you're saying there is very wise, because the antidote is be perfectly happy and comfortable being alone, right? And you have to do the work to do that. So when I sit an entrepreneur down and they start running this reset process from Heavily Meditated, they're going to talk about their parents. They're going to talk about bullies and teachers and coaches and maybe a car accident. Like, they're going to go through all the things that triggered them. And they're going to talk about whatever relationship they're in and betrayals. For entrepreneurs, it's injustice and betrayal are the 2 biggest things to reset. Where, like, I did the right thing and I got punched in the face for it. And I talk about some things that happened to me. Like, I was on the Joe Rogan show 3 times, and then he tried to destroy my reputation because he had a competing investment. Right? Like, it's all there in the book. And that really messed with my head. I'm like, what is going on? And I talk about the process that I went through in order to just forgive that. I'm like, I think Joe was a hero during the pandemic, and I saw one of his comedy things in Austin where I live, and it was funny. Right? Like there's no anger.
The mothership's a great place.
Yeah, exactly. So I look at all the things that used to really like have a charge, and they don't. But with entrepreneurs, they can get rid of all that. And then I say, great. Now you're going to run the reset process, and you're going to put yourself in the chair across from you, and you're going to remove the triggers that you have about your own system. And this is where shame, it just evaporates. And the difference between guilt and shame is very important. Shame is about something you are, and guilt is about something you did. And so if you made a mistake and, someone got injured or something, you're probably going to feel guilty about that. And that's actually a healthy feeling. But if you go, I'm such a piece of crap, I can't believe I did that, that's unhealthy. And when you run that process on yourself and you get rid of all the triggers you have about yourself, what's left is, I'm totally happy to be alone. And you know what interesting thing happens when you get to that state? You attract amazing friends.
Yes.
And I run with my girlfriend, Christina Weber, a relationship mastermind for entrepreneurs. And we bring in couples and singles, there's about 30, 40 of them, with top relationship coaches. And then we sit down and we coach them on a hot seat where they talk about what's really going on. Mm-hmm. And the people who are single, who say, I'm going to take a year and I'm just going to work on myself, they attract the most amazing partners into their lives. And the ones who say, I'm just going to focus on dating, they find people with the same level of trauma that they have. And then they create chaos until you do the work.
Yeah.
And the worst you can do is form friends or form a core intimate relationship with people who are stuck. Because if you're evolving and they're not, you'll just have a gap between you, and eventually your relationship will fall apart, or you will change your friend group. Yeah. And there's nothing wrong with changing your friend group.
Sure. Yeah, that's why I say it's so difficult though, is because do the work. Well, the fuck does that mean? Like, what do you mean? What do we mean by do the work? Like, how do I get to know myself better? How do I sit in silence and not have to be distracted by something and be okay with that version of me? Which is really where it was kind of the catalyst for my own personal growth. It was realizing that. Whereas somebody challenged me one time, some mentor of mine was like, spend some time by yourself for like a couple of days. Go somewhere away from everybody, no distractions, no TV, no anything. And I was like, that sounds like torture to like go be by myself. And now it's like one of the things that I search for. It's like how can I build, because I'm married to my high school sweetheart. I've been with her since I was 16. Got married when I was 21. We have 2 kids. So thank you. So our house is chaos right now. We have a 6-year-old, a 4-year-old. Well, my son's about to be 6.
Kids are chaos.
We got a dog. I got my wife. And all of it's the best thing about. It's also awesome. It's chaos, but it's fantastic. But also, if you don't spend some time alone, I think you're asking for more problems in your relationships. I just believe now at this point that like relationships are the foundation of happiness. Yes. But relationship with yourself is the foundation for good relationships outside of yourself. And if you don't focus on this one piece, it's when you start wondering like what's going on? Like, why do I have a bad relationship with this person? What happened to my relationship with this person? How come I can't connect with this person anymore? And it's easy because of the relationships. It's easy to start pointing the finger at everybody else and like, they're the problem, or that's the problem, or this external circumstance happened that prevented us from connecting, or whatever. You start feeding yourself all these lies because you're just not focused on creating some sort of internal sense of that I am okay and happy being me and being with me without any form of external distraction or anything. And which also is the insidious part of social media. Is like, I love social media. I think it's great. There's a lot of great things that come from it. The worst thing about it to me is the word social, because it implies that it's a social activity. when really it should be focused more on the media part.
Right.
It is a form of media consumption. It's no different than watching Netflix. What happens in your brain is the same thing that happens. Like when you're scrolling through TikToks, it's not social. It isn't a social thing. It's just you consuming media. Yeah. So if you are worried about, if this is something that's like, if you find yourself addicted to the scroll, then start looking at that activity as a media activity, not as a social activity, because it does not replace actual social activity. It is just a way to connect with other people. Now, using it as a form to connect with people, sure, that might be good. You might connect with somebody who you would have no business connecting with or ever be able to find otherwise. However, if that's the only activity that you're doing and you're marking it off as like, well, I was social today or whatever, it's like, that is not what social media is. It is way more media than it is social. It's just that by definition, you think that you're solving this problem, and in reality, you're only making that problem worse.
There's another insidious thing with social media. If you go back 5-10 years, it was not very much video. It was written. And when your brain is reading something, you're using your imagination to turn the words into thoughts and feelings and to construct something. But when you watch video, your brain goes into this theta kind of programmed state. And you probably see this in your kids. If you turn the TV on, like their faces go slack. When you're scrolling through videos, your face goes slack. And it pisses me off that Facebook ruined their algorithm and then Instagram ruined their algorithm and everyone wants to be TikTok. Like, I don't want to watch videos. I can read 10 times faster than a video. And when I read, my brain works. And so like, where do I go? I think X is probably the best right now of just being able to read something so that I get to decide versus having something that takes over my brain, which is what videos do.
Yeah. So how do you solve for that? You're like personally, how do you solve for
like the social media thing?
Not necessarily social media, just being with yourself, by yourself, and being happy and content in that state.
I have run the reset process that's in heavily meditated for 6 months. And normally it takes about a week of doing that. At 40 years of Zen, when people come out, they have the same brain waves as someone who's done advanced Zen meditation for decades. I've also hired a shaman to drop me off in a cave for 4 days all by myself and with no phone or anything like that. And it's because I knew that if I was lonely, I would eat. And I knew that if I didn't eat, I'd be hypoglycemic. And so I'm like, put me in a cave. I'll yell at the walls. I got no food. I'm just going to face it.
That's the medical terminology.
Yeah, exactly. And that was really powerful. And over the course of just finding every single thing that triggers me externally or internally, and then turning off the alert, it's the same as going into your phone and saying no alerts from text messages or emails or TikToks or anything. So, I can use my phone. It just sits there.
Yeah.
Right. And if I want to go look, I'll look. So I don't have the mean voice in my head anymore that I had.
Yeah.
I'm perfectly happy to be alone. And I'm perfectly happy to be with people I choose to be with. And I'm perfectly happy to be with people I don't necessarily know, but where I'm doing something that's of service. And I'm very mindful about, who I want to spend my time with and where I want to allocate my energy. And I have, I mentioned earlier, I have 9 companies and I'm also the main talent for the companies. So I've done 2 episodes a week for, I think, 14 years now on my podcast and, 500 million downloads, and I write a book every 2 years. If I wasn't comfortable being alone, I couldn't have the time to think of that.
Yeah.
And maybe the most important thing for that is I don't keep a to-do list at all. It goes on my calendar. If there's not time on the calendar, I'm not doing it. Right. And I have help with my calendar, I have an assistant for that.
Sure.
But otherwise, I would just always, whenever I'm alone, I have to do this, And it's kind of funny. I've been dating my girlfriend for a couple of years. She's an entrepreneur too, with We Deepen. And she's like, you have more companies than anyone else I know. And like all this stuff going on, you run this big biohacking event and all these things, but you have more free time than anyone. Like, how is this even possible? So workaholism is something that I really had in my 30s and 40s. Even when I started the biohacking movement, I had a full-time job as a VP and I just stayed up late. And I started a company and built it until I could replace my salary. So I was working, 14, 16 hours a day sometimes. And that's not a good way to be happy because it's too much busyness.
Yeah.
So I have hours I work and I have hours I don't work. And I live by myself. She lives very close to me. So that means there are times I have the whole evening and I'm not going to have to talk to anyone and I get to have alone time. And alone time is as rejuvenating as being with an intimate partner or with your community, only if you've done the work so that alone time is nourishing instead of scary.
Yeah.
And I've done that work.
The work is the hardest part.
It is.
Because it not being able to be alone with yourself is just the symptom of a deeper problem.
Yeah.
And it usually relates to some sort of lack of self-respect or lack of self-worth. Self-worth is a little bit more tricky to navigate because it's really just an inherent feeling that you have to come to. That I had this problem where my self-worth would be high when I had things that I could point to at like evidence that I am somebody that is of high value. And then when I would mess something up or things would go poorly, then that feeling would go away and my self-worth would vanish and my confidence with it. And I started realizing like, oh, that's not actually self-worth.
Not at all.
Self-worth is just the belief in your worth as a person for just taking a breath every day and waking up. Yeah. And that part is a little bit more difficult even than like the self-esteem and self-confidence pieces because like those are a little bit more linear. Self-confidence just comes from like keeping the promises you make to yourself, continuing to do things day in and day out that other people aren't willing to do. You can build confidence through competence. You can work on some of these other things. Self-worth is a little bit more difficult. So when you're examining this thing, like the best practice that I've found for myself is like, if one of these things is missing, if I don't respect myself, if I don't have self-worth, it's like, well, what's the version of me that I would have inherent respect for? And how can I make myself more that person? So my goals started switching more from being like objective measurements of like revenue numbers or whatever it is, and started being a lot more about like, who do I want to become that is more capable of doing the things that I want to have achieved at some point. And if you look at it through that lens, I think that through time, you start kind of building that muscle of, okay, I am somebody who's worthy of my own respect and somebody who's worthy of unconditional love for me just because of who I am and who I've become. But the awareness is just the first step, is the unfortunate part.
Awareness is hard.
The next thing is going to be more difficult, which is actually changing who you are.
It's funny. I wrote a personal development book like 6-7 years ago. So I've interviewed 400 amazing people. What do they have in common? And went through it. It's one of the hardest books I've written, but it has the highest percentage of 5-star reviews. And one of the laws in the book was, don't discover yourself. And you're like, what? A lot of people say, I'm going to go find myself. Like, no, you create yourself. You decide who you want to be. And that is different than self-worth, which you're talking about. Self-worth is even if you don't do anything that's externally validating, you're still worthy. And it's not a thought. And this was my big mistake. It's like I would torture myself by thinking, well, I should think this way. No, it's a feeling. So what this really comes down to is editing the feelings in your body so that they actually match the reality you want them to match. Because we always try to solve these things cognitively and it doesn't work. So for me, the biggest thing has been the reset process that is in heavily meditated because it lets you experience a feeling that isn't appropriate, that isn't serving you. And a lack of self-worth, believe it or not, that's the operating system in your body, also known as the ego. It's not your brain. It's a distributed system of ancient bacteria trying to keep the petri dish from getting eaten. Like it's very fast and very dumb. And it somehow learned that if it makes you question your self-worth, that you'll survive better. And it's doing it for a reason. So you could fight it with your brain, or you could go in and retrain it the way you train a dog. And then all of a sudden, it stops doing that. And I look at the ego like a giant Labrador retriever. It comes into your house, it slobbers on the couch, it eats all the food off the table, it pees on something and eats your shoes, right? And then it barks. It humps your leg. All the things, right? Well, that same dog, it can be a service dog, and it walks in, you put a piece of popcorn on its nose, it just sits there until you tell it it can eat. You can train your nervous system, you can train your operating system to be the service dog. And when you do that, there is no question about your self-worth. You're worthy because you're a human. And that's it. And it doesn't matter if you're flawed. It doesn't matter if you make mistakes. It doesn't matter if you lose your company. It doesn't matter if you yell at your kids. It's not about your self-worth. And if you yell at your kids, you're going to apologize. And if you screw up your company, you're either going to fix it or start another one, right? But permission to make bad decisions and make mistakes is necessary or you can't grow. And it's that self-worth thing that stops people from taking risks. And when you talk about those F words, fear, food, fertility, friend, forgiveness, when you forgive yourself for the things you wish you hadn't done, that's when you stop obsessing. And that's when the voice in your head gets quiet. And that's when you can show up in your life in a very different way. And it's non-obvious because we always think it's our brains above the neck. It's all happening below the neck. That's where the problem is. It's in automated systems to keep you alive. And they're trainable.
Yeah.
And that for entrepreneurs is the best. And for the rest of us too. You want to be in a good relationship? That's what you do. And all the self-loathing and loneliness and all that, it's unnecessary, but it's there. It's just your body desperately trying to keep you from dying. And teach your body reality.
Love this, man. This has been a fascinating conversation. Before we go, I have one selfish question to ask you.
Sure.
I don't know if you've noticed, but I've had a Zyn in my mouth this whole time. I've been meaning to ask a nutritionist, biohacker, because I've Googled it so many times. Oh, there you go. Okay, sweet. So I want to ask you this question because I've given myself an excuse to start, popping in these nicotine pouches. But I've heard good and bad things about them. Can you clarify anything about nicotine and its effects on the body?
The reason that nicotine is a thing in biohacking circles is that about 10 years ago, I interviewed Dr. Nicotine from Vanderbilt University. And I just call him that.
Yeah.
His name is Andrew. And in 1986, he published the first paper showing that pharmaceutical nicotine, but not smoking or using tobacco, reverses Alzheimer's disease. And I have been talking about using nicotine as a longevity compound in low doses since that time. It's in my big longevity book. And I've talked about it just incessantly as one of my favorite nootropics. So there is good evidence, unless you have cancer, that you should use a small amount of nicotine if you want your brain to work better. It is neuroprotective. It simulates exercise through something called PGC1 alpha. And there's just abundant evidence that nicotine is good for human beings in low doses and without all the crap that comes from breathing stuff that's on fire.
Sure. What would a low dose be?
For longevity, I recommend somewhere around 5 milligrams a day.
Okay.
And you can use more than that most likely without there being major problems. If you use too much nicotine, you can have thinning of hair or erectile dysfunction. And those are good signs to look for. But there is a problem. You're using Zyn. Zyn has microplastics in those pouches.
Okay.
So that is not the preferred way to do it. You can either get a spray outside the US, which I oftentimes use. You can use Lucy, which is something that doesn't have bad sweeteners because most of it has stuff that cooks your brain with the sweeteners. And there's also another brand called Knick Knack, which I have because it's convenient right now. And these only have a kind of sugar alcohol that stops cavities and nicotine and natural flavors, nothing else.
Okay.
So Zyn, bad sweeteners, microplastics.
Okay.
And if you overuse it, just look for those side effects.
Yeah.
But different people need different amounts. If you have an ADHD brain or you're just really tired or you're going to go on stage, I find that nicotine is as important as this other molecule on my arm. That's caffeine. So all of my books have been written, except for the first one, have been written with a combination of caffeine and nicotine, like almost every great book ever written.
Good. You're speaking my language then.
Every
time I do a podcast interview, to have some coffee, some nicotine. One of these, I know there's a bunch of bad stuff in here.
And what do you think's in here? Danger coffee.
Danger coffee. There you go. Real quick on the cancer thing. So I did actually have cancer last year. I'm in remission now.
What flavor?
Testicular.
Okay.
In remission now, but I'm obviously still going back in for quarterly checkups to make sure there's no metastasizing or anything like that.
You doing a blood biopsy for that?
No.
Okay.
No.
So there's a couple of companies that can do a biopsy in your blood to look for hundreds of types of cancer now.
Okay.
I did a podcast with at least one of them. And you should also do a whole body MRI.
Okay.
like Prenuvo, and maybe even have those guys on the show. They run about $2,500 and they'll spot about 500 types of cancer at stage 1 anywhere in the body. And because cancer is just a huge problem post-COVID vaccine injury, and I'm just calling it what it is. So people who got the vaccine have a much higher incidence of stillbirth. We know the spike protein goes to your testes and to your ovaries, and so do microplastics. So what you want to do is if you have no active cancer and you're doing nicotine, the reason nicotine is not a good idea when you have cancer is nicotine drives angiogenesis. That's the formation of new blood vessels. You want new blood vessels in your brain, in your reproductive organs, in your body. It's actually good. But if you have cancer, one of the Western theories is you have to starve the cancer by not healing anymore. So that's why there's a little warning label with nicotine. Nicotine does not cause cancer. Burning stuff and putting it in your lungs causes cancer. Different animals.
Yeah.
So I think you're safe.
Okay.
And I would be doing, I don't know what kind of quarterly checkups if they're just doing some kind of imaging.
CTs, ultrasound.
Okay.
And then blood work.
Yeah, the blood work I think is most important for that. But you're working with cancer docs, so do what they say.
Yeah. Got it. Well, cool, man. That was my selfish question wrap up for this. But Dave, thanks so much for doing this. Fantastic, honestly, fascinating conversation. Wish we had some more time. The new book, Heavily Meditated, is out wherever you buy books. Go pick up a copy of Heavily Meditated. You've heard just a little bit of a snippet of the things that are inside of that book, which are really beneficial for everybody, all walks of life. Even if you're not an entrepreneur or whatever that means, just go pick up a copy of Heavily Meditated. You guys know, whenever we talk about books on the show, is the one thing I always recommend unlimited budget for. Buy the book, put it in your shelf at least, crack open the first couple of pages and start reading through it. So Dave, thanks so much for doing this.
Thank you, Travis.
Everybody else listening, remember to leave every relationship better than you found it. Catch you on the next episode. Peace out.